I don't know. Okay, looks like we are live. I don't know what's going to happen tonight because obviously we were meant to be here last weekend and then things happened. But anyway, I am joined by the delightful Jolien from Jolien Reads. So, how you doing?
Hi everyone. Thanks, Jose. I'm doing quite well. As you know, I took a little bit of a break on Booktube, but I'm back now, and I'm just really glad that you invited me on this new conversation series.
Yeah, right, excellent. But I mean, you're a hard woman to grab hold of, metaphorically
Yes,
speaking. But before we start, you got a decision to make because I know you are already on the fermented juice, and I need to join you there. So
you do.
you gotta decide for me. So I've got this is gonna be one of my last proper beers I ever drink. So I've got the Pirate Triple. So I've tried the
Mm.
quadruple, but I haven't tried the triple. And I've got, which I haven't tried either, mead. So it's craft mead. It's just honey, water, and yeast fermented. So I don't know what that's going to be like because I've never tried it before. So I guess I know what you're leaning to, but you're going to decide for me because either one is going to be a new experience. What should I do?
Well, I've heard of the Pirat one, but I haven't heard of the other one yet. So now I'm just curious, and I think that you need to try the second one.
It's not, I don't think it's beer. I mean, I bought it from my local craft beer shop, but it doesn't have the right ingredients. It's just water, honey, and yeast. So
Hmm.
I think isn't mead what the Vikings used to drink, fermented honey.
Well,
I
it,
don't
it
think
is very fantasy themed then, right?
that's
So
yeah, that's true. That's true. I feel a bit of an imposter. I don't think I've got the facial hair or the muscles to go with it, but on my way to Valhalla, let's see how it goes. So yeah, I mean, and you did your video when you came back to YouTube after your break, and you were very open about the reasons why you took a break and so on. Most of it was work related, but did you feel a bit of burnout from BookTube?
I think so, yeah. And I also think that I maybe focused too much on work in that video because that was like the trigger that started it all. But in a way, it's also just the person that I am. Even if it's just a hobby, and I know that a lot of people say, like, Booktube, it's a hobby. If you don't want to make your work out of it, which I don't, if you don't care if you make money, you shouldn't care if you get views. You shouldn't care if your subscriber count goes up. You shouldn't care about any of the analytics. But I do. That's just the type of person I am. I'm pretty competitive in real life as well. All of the hobbies that I do, when I play board games, when I go to obedience class with my dogs, I need to see improvement. And that's what makes me happy. That's why I enjoy doing a hobby. So sometimes I could feel bad about the numbers, even though it really doesn't matter. Or I would feel like, oh, people are doing a read along. I need to jump on that read along. I need to participate. And even if the books didn't really grab me, or even if I didn't really have the time to read them, I made myself read them. And part of it is because Booktube is a very nice community and because it's fun to be able to discuss books with others. So you just want to be part of that. But in the end, if you feel like you have to read certain books, if at the beginning of the month you have 10 books on your TBR and all of them are part of buddy reads, read alongs, and you can't get to them in time, you start feeling guilty, it adds to the stress. And then if the work situation is already pretty shitty as well, it doesn't really help. But I think that I need to just look at booktube from another angle and try to take it a little bit slower, I guess.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I no, I sympathize with that sort of that competitive nature. I mean, I never was, or sort of I am with the things that I really enjoy. But like, so I do long distance running, and then over a period of time, I was very competitive, but with myself. So I wanted to improve my times over whatever distances. I was trying to get faster. I was trying to run longer, whatever. But it got to a point where I got a little bit burnt out from that as well. So I think with age and with experience, and certainly, with kids comes a shift in in perspectives. So now I don't train as hard as I used to. I don't run as much as I used to. I don't read as much as I used to. I don't do anything anywhere near as much as I used to. But I am guilty to that whole check-in subscriber count with certain regularity, even though I know that, this is just a hobby and it's not going to go anywhere in and of itself, really. But you've like what always caught my attention about the way you approach it, which is so like not what I would do. Like, but you had all your stats for the year, and you had your plans, and you're reading journals. I'm gonna do, and you had your graphs, your charts, and everything. It's like, wow, like that. I don't know. Like, it's not how I would approach it, and I respect it, but I found that really. What's the word? I don't want to say shocking, but to me, it was really like it really caught my attention about how you approach the whole thing. It was very business-like.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that I do in life in general. I'm somebody who goes for anything. If I start with something, I go too much into it and it becomes like my main hobby, my obsession almost. And that also leads to quick burnout, I suppose, because you can't do it at that level for a long period of time. But I'm like that with board games. If I get in my board game period, I buy a lot of board games, I play them every night, and then after a while I'm just like, I'm done with it right now. But with the goals, I'm just a very goal-oriented person, and I always overestimate myself quite a bit, because when I look back at those goals and stats videos, I really enjoy making them. And I think that even at the beginning of the year, with my goals and plans video, I actually said, like, I'm going to participate in less read-alongs. So I think that even then I already felt like, you know, hi, Shadia, that it wasn't really realistic. But then you get sucked into it because it is that much fun, to be honest. And I think that part of it was also that I wanted to, I guess, support other content creators as well, because I know that it's fun to have a comment, to see that people are watching your videos. So I try to do that for as many small content creators as possible. But in the end, it just took over my entire life, which
Well,
is too dramatic to say it that way, but it's a little bit true, I suppose.
excuse me. No, sorry, you are absolutely right. I was talking to either Chas last Sunday or Chris, because they joined on Saturday. I just logged in to say, sorry, Jolien can't make it. I apologize. And then Chris jumped in and we ended up having a 2-hour conversation. But we were talking about following other channels, right? And if we subscribe to 20 other booktubers, like, I haven't got the physical time to follow what everyone else creates and posts and and uploads all the time. So then I feel bad because I'm not really, like you said, supporting them as much as I could, even though I like them. I like what they do, but I cannot get home in the evening, do all the stuff I need to do around the house, then go training, come back, and then watch 10 different channels of people talking about books. I haven't got that physical time to do it.
Yeah, exactly the same for me. And it's also like I started as a booktube viewer for the longest time before I started the channel. And then I was also subscribed to a lot of people, but it was less stressful. I clicked on a video because I was interested in the topic. And if I didn't want to watch booktube for 2 weeks, that was also fine. While now it almost felt like a task that I have to like check at the end of the evening. Like I've watched this many booktube videos. I never had a watch later list until I had a booktube channel. That's when I made a watch later list, and I had more than 100 videos on it at the end of the week, which was, yeah. So now I'm taking it much lower, and sometimes I feel bad, like, oh, that's a content creator that I haven't watched for a while, but it needs to stay fun for me. I'm sorry, Jose, because would you say that again? I'm not hearing you at the moment.
Don't know what I was doing there. Sorry, I must have clicked on the wrong thing.
I thought that I had issues on.
Yeah, no. That I was going to say something there, but I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can just follow everything, and maybe that would be Shadia. She watches everyone all the time, so maybe she'll be the next one to start up a channel
That would be nice.
soon. I don't know where I clicked there. I must be losing it. Um,
It happens to the best of us.
well, at least you are the best at something. Was I going to ask you? I was going to ask you. Yeah, because there is too much. So there's too much to watch, and there is too much to read. I know you got this, in my opinion, apologies, ridiculous book hauls where you'll buy so many books. Your TBR, like I think I told you once, your TBR is a library. It's not a TBR.
It
And
is.
how do you keep track of that?
Well, I made a video. Well, at this point it's before the break, so I think that it's half a year ago at this point. And it was with all my unread books, which was almost 170. And that's when I realized like this is way too much. I can't choose which book to read next, especially because the majority of those were actually firsts in the series. So when you start a series, you need to buy more of them. So in reality, I had more books on my TBR than just the ones on my physical TBR. So I actually haven't been buying books for couple of months now, only the ones that I received for my birthday, and I think that that's already like a big plus. And I'm just trying to revisit my goals, and like you said, slow down with the physical TBR, not making it larger at the very least, and just now I have my seasonal TBR, and I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm more positive about it because I have 15 books on that for 3 months. That's what I'm going to pick out of. So that's like my small physical TBR, just to narrow it down, to not stand in front of like a huge shelf and need to pick. It's too overwhelming for me, and just pick whatever I want, and not like now we do have the Age of Madness read along. I am trying to participate in the Dandelion Dynasty with Steve because I read the first two on my own. So those are the two that I'm looking at now, but that's it, which is already a lot less than what I had before. And
Yeah.
it's really liberating to just pick books because you want to read them.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I jumped. What did we do this year? We did the first low standalones first, and I was not planning on doing that at all this year. That just happened, and it was like, yeah, okay, cool. It was nice because it was fairly simple, and they were the standalones. And now we're doing Age of Madness, but I don't think with my pace of life, where I've got going, I could do more than that. I mean, I've got next year, I would like to do the next big series, read along with Ian from B&B Books. But my mental TBR keeps getting longer and longer. And some things inevitably have to fall off because there's just so much out there. And then I feel bad because I really want to read that series or this book or that book. And yeah, I haven't got the time. And sometimes it can feel a little bit stressy, which I know it should not. I mean, reading is not what I do to get stressed. It's what I do for exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
I think this is like Booktube generates a slightly competitive, for want of a better expression, sort of edge to it that is not necessarily the healthiest thing in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also what Rekindled Reader there says, like, if I didn't have a Booktube channel, I'd be able to read way more. And that's definitely true. And especially now, I'm just filming videos whenever I feel like it, which is once a week, maybe. Sometimes it's less. But especially towards the end of my reading slump or when I started to take a break, I had the weekly updates every Sunday. And then you feel like you have to talk about books. You can't keep talking about the same book 3 weeks on end. So you have to finish one book that week, at the very least. Then you want to have a different video as well, because the weekly update videos, not everybody watches that, only like your core audience. So that's already 2 videos. And with my setting here, like my books are just in the living room. They're in the darkest place of the house. So you have to set up all the lights, all the stuff. It takes a lot of time. And then I sometimes think if I wasn't doing this, I had maybe... At that point, I would have 10 hours more every week just to read. So it's a tough balance to strike. You love reading, you love making the videos, you love communicating with the community, but it's difficult to have a balance.
And I'm sure it's the same for you, maybe. I spend double, triple the time editing and producing the videos as low quality as they are than recording them. I wish I could just record what I'm saying, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, bash, upload it, done. But no, it's the thumbnail, adjust the color, adjust the light, up the sound, add effects, whatever. And I think one video a week is what I can manage realistically.
Hmm.
And the funny thing about Booktube is that possibly it's the book review videos that get the least amount of watches.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sometimes like the videos that you spend most time on, because you want to have like a good review. You want to talk about the positives, about the bad things. You want to make sure that everybody understands that what you didn't like might not be what others don't like. Talking about it in a sport or free way is also not always easy. So it's the type of videos that take me at least a very long time. And for me, which is strange, editing takes a long time for most people. For me, it doesn't really, because my are just sit down videos. I talk and I upload it more or less without cutting. For me, it's filming that takes a very long time, because from the moment that I feel like I have a too long pause between words or I stumble over words, I retake the entire shot. So it can really take me hours to film a 10-minute video, which is infuriating. And I think that I need to just be able to stumble on tape and just say, well, let's keep it. Because I'm very conscious about it. And I don't know if you're the same, Jose, but because English is not my native language, I always feel like, oh, if I now mess it up, people are especially going to say that that's not nice. And then I see somebody who is, they live in the US, they were born in the US, and they stumble and they just keep it in the video. So I feel like
Yeah,
I'm like more conscious about that.
I positively hate when I trip over my words or something doesn't come out right. And it's like, oh, you're such an idiot. Like, couldn't you speak properly? Um, but here, so it's an interesting point that Chris mentioned. Like, maybe I'm callous. Maybe I'm not a very good person. Like, I don't care about letting people down. But I think for me, my channel has always been about this is what I do. This is what I'm doing, and I'm okay if you. I'm more than okay. I'm really happy if people like it. But if people don't like it, I'm okay to engage in that sort of disagreement. But I don't have in the back of my mind the feel that I owe people a weekly video or an opinion or a take on something. How's that for you?
It's it's difficult because I know that a lot of people tell me it doesn't really matter. I know that you don't like Discord, but I do have a Discord, and a lot of people there say just do whatever you want to do. If you don't have a video this week, it doesn't matter. If you want to do vlogs instead of other videos, it's fine. And I really appreciate that. But as a people pleaser, part of my enjoyment comes from seeing that people actually like what I'm doing. So it's going back and forth. Sometimes I do feel guilty. Sometimes I can really also look at other people, what they are able to do, and I'm questioning myself, like, why am I not able to do the same thing? So I think that it's also something that I need to let go a little bit more. Like Chris has mentioned, like you need to just be aware of the fact that you're always going to let some people down. But a big part for me is also that I have a lot of ideas, and that's not easy. Like if I now make a list of videos that I want to make, I have probably 50 plus in 10 minutes, but I can't make all of those 50. And if I wait a couple of months, some of those might not be relevant. So I always feel that pressure to make all of the videos that I want to make and put them out in time, which is just impossible. So I need to pick and choose which ones.
Yeah, I mean, maybe something for me is something that I've taken from my years running. I've participated in hundreds of races. I've never won a single one. I've never got anywhere near top 10. Like, I'm just happy to be in the top 30% for my age category. So like, I know I'm not going to be good at this because I haven't got the time, I haven't got the resources, but I just try to do the best I can. And I think I've squared that in my head, and I'm okay with that. And when you get a positive or a negative interaction that leads to something fruitful, that's what I'm happy about. That's what I
Mhm.
I do it for. Um, but yeah, Booktube is a strange thing. And back to your Discord point, I had Discord because I use it for role playing games. It's the only way I've managed to connect with people, and we run games weekdays, role playing Call of Cthulhu Dungeons and Dragons. I don't get it. For like, I think who was it? A few people. Baron from Your Brain and Books, and Bryce from Shelf Center and stuff. They've got like a Discord server, so they invited. I joined in, and I was like, I haven't got the time for this. There's over 100 people posting, writing stuff like that, and I couldn't keep up. Like I got out there within 3 days. I cannot come home, turn on the
Yeah.
computer every night and plow through all the different threads, and it's too much. It's not feasible for me.
Yeah, I also think that it depends on how you view Discord. Like the very big channels or servers, I'm part of it, but it's impossible to read everything. Like Mike Book Reviews, he has one thread about food and drinks that I follow because I really like seeing what other people eat. And it's one about House of the Dragon now, which I'm watching, so that's fun. And then book hauls and currently reading. Those are the 4 of probably 30 that I follow, because if I follow everything, it's just too much. And then my own Discord, I think that maybe 10 people are really active, so that's nice. It's easy to follow, and you know who everybody is. If somebody new joins, we immediately know who they are. And sometimes when you join a very big channel, it's like you get lost in the void. Even if you start talking, people talk over you way too much, which is natural. If it's a channel that has 4,000 members, nobody's going to notice you. So I can understand that the big channels are a little bit difficult to find your place, but the small ones I really like. But it's very different from a forum. So I think that you need to approach them in a different way as well.
Yeah, I think I've taken the executive decision conclusion. Discord is not for me. I quite like what Steve has got going over at his website with the page chewing and the forums and stuff like that. Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah, that's a great one, especially because he also has the calendar. But he does so many live streams and conversations that he needs that. So that's easy as well. If you want to join, you can, and there is the calendar, and you can see if you're free.
Yeah, the Grimoire. That's the one I joined, and I mean, I don't think it's got anywhere near what you said. It's not in the magnitude of thousands, but I can't. What? So you're in there all day? I can't. I can't even be there for half an hour. It's just it's weird. It's got that really. I mean, you're too young, Jolien, but it's got that cranky feel of the 90s, the old IRC chats. That's probably before your time. I think that's sort of.
I remember them, but it's been a while.
yeah, they died in the 90s, I think it was. It's got that sort of fairly retro feel about it. Didn't click with it. But like I said, people, if you got the time, or maybe you're at a different stage in life, that's great. I would like to read. Go on, sorry.
No, I wanted to say that it's all about making decisions, and I think that that's a healthy decision. If you say like, I don't have the time to engage enough for what I find enjoyable, then it's best to just say like, I'm going to keep that window closed, because it's another thing that you need to invest time in.
Yeah. Okay, so totally off topic here. Because I don't know, I was just thinking, I've realized there's a couple of authors there that I've got far too many books from them, given how much I like them. Does that happen to you?
Well, yes. Of course I had Wheel of Time on my shelves with past tense, because I did sell them. I got a really nice price for them, and I hate when I have. It's already annoying when you have a lot of unread books on your shelves and you know that it's going to take you years to get to them, but to then keep books that you know you're not going to read, I just found that meaningless. Plus, every time that somebody saw Wheel of Time behind me, they were like, "Oh, Wheel of Time, it's great," and then I had to mention like, I DNF'd it. So yeah, I know that you persisted, Jose. I honestly can't believe that you did that.
No,
14
but I
books.
wouldn't tell you they are great. But I don't want to. Every time we end up talking, I end up dissing the Wheel of Time. So I'm not going to do it today. But no, it happened to me with Tim Powers and Stephen King. I think I really want to like them. There's something there that sort of brings me back. Like I want to give them a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a seventh chance, and it's never quite as good as I hope them to be. But I'm still
Mhm,
willing to be surprised. I think it's those two authors for me.
mhm. Yeah,
And
and especially Stephen King has like how many books? So if it's impossible to keep up. Another one that I really, I don't know. It's like sometimes it's a win, sometimes it's a lose, and I don't know what it's going to be before I pick up his books. But it's Brandon Sanderson, and he's from like the time when I started Booktube, and I just bought everything that he has written because, well, he is the number one fantasy author, and if you like fantasy, you're going to like his works. So I bought all of them, and now some of them I absolutely love. And then Stormlight Archive, I think that I just had too much hope for that series. I had very high expectations. And I think that I've read too much in between to kind of like cater towards my taste, that it's just not for me anymore. So now I have all those books on my shelves and I'm thinking maybe I should just sell them.
yeah, because I saw your post. Because one of you talking about your 50 ideas for your videos, that you were considering talking about why you DNF'd Stormlight Archive, and that's one of my potential series for next year to read with Ian. But I don't want to know too much about it. But with Sanderson, I think the problem was he was so overhyped that when I read the Mistborn trilogy, I was like, is this it? Is this like is this the savior of fantasy? It's like, is this it?
Mhm.
And I don't know if I should go into Stormlight with far lower expectations and maybe that way become more palatable. I don't know.
Yeah, that might help. I know that I really enjoyed Mistborn, but it was at the time when I wasn't reading for like 10 years. And then I picked up Mistborn and The Grim Company, and I loved both of them. So I don't really know if it's because I really loved Mistborn or if it was that I realized how much I loved reading in general and if I had a pretty low bar at that point. But Mistborn I quite enjoyed. And then the two standalones, don't really know. One is about color and the other one is Elantris. I know that a lot of people hate Elantris. I
War,
personally love that.
yeah, Warbreaker.
That one. I like those two just fine. But then Stormlight Archive, you're not going to like this, Jose, but it reminded me a little bit of Wheel of Time. I thought like I can see why Brandon Sanderson was picked to finish the Wheel of Time.
Like I think, to be honest, I think Mistborn was correct. There was nothing majorly wrong with it as opposed to the Wheel of Time. There's no major flaws there, um, but it wasn't super well. Like a hard magic system, no matter how cool it is not enough to carry the story. So I was thinking of reading Warbreaker towards the end of the year to see if that got me a bit more excited about Stormlight. But in terms of big series out there, I think all there is Malazan at the moment, which seems to be everyone's favorite. Sword of Truth, which a lot of people seem to love or hate.
Mhm.
And Shannara is a no-go. I'm not going to do it's 30 books. I'm not going to go there.
A lot.
And the Stormlight, I think those are the big ones out there, unless there's something else I'm not familiar with. Other than Elder Links, which I've read, other than Song of Ice and Fire.
I
That's
the only other one that I think about, just because I tried to read the first book, is the Rift War cycle by Feist,
yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah. I
also
think
very old. It's pre 2000 at the very least.
right. Oh, yeah. That was okay. That was the other thing. Because Chris mentioned Rift War Cycle last week, but I also get the impression, and obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to read a lot of modern fantasy, What's the earliest book by publication date you think you read, or sort of around what year?
I'm thinking that probably I'm like looking at my shelves. It will be something like Assassin's Apprentice, I suppose, which is early 90s. Witcher is also early 90s, I think, and then A Song of Ice and Fire as well. So those ones. Because I'm looking at my shelves, nothing older than that. I do have two older series that I want to read, but now I'm thinking older is probably still 90s. So nothing older than that.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting because I think more like pre 2000 fantasy was super different from where it is now, and this I think it's probably fantasy has grown up, and I think it's trying to target maybe a more mature audience, whereas things like Lord of the Rings, Elric, or the Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms stuff, it was much more kind of teenager Dungeons and Dragonish type thing, and I think that needed to evolve. But I miss the high fantasy elements that are totally absent from a lot of modern fantasy. Taking Joe previous conversations we had about Joe Abercrombie, I've said he's not a fantasy reader.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Chadia, by the way, mentions that I've read Dune, and that's a book that came out in the 70s, I suppose. So, And
You get that's your get out of jail free card.
plus, I just recently read The Last Unicorn, which is also an older fairy tale. So that also counts.
That's true. Okay, you make it back into my good people list. That's right.
Thanks, Chadia. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I've read a lot of new fantasy, and I know that Raf always gets a little bit annoyed when I talk about traditional fantasy because he says that it doesn't exist, but I just mean like the older fantasy, which is I feel like I judge it with a modern lens. Like I see the tropes of the chosen one and like the kitchen boy becoming a hero, and I feel like I've seen it already, which is of course not fair because when they wrote it, it was completely new and they had a very hard road to pave. And now new fantasy authors, they have like a very easy, well, I wouldn't say easy, but they have it easier to try something new and something different because they have that to look to. But something like Joe Abercrombie, even though I like what he's written, I do agree with you that the fantasy is so minimal in that series that you could have put it in our time and make it historical fiction. Although I also like that he has a more fresh vision on it and he has fantasy because it's in a secondary world and there are some small magical elements, but it's very minimal. And I would like to see something back like A Song of Ice and Fire. And maybe it's around. I'm not going to say that I know all fantasy series, but something like that that's new, it's fresh, but it still has those traditional fantasy elements.
Yeah. Seems like someone's pissed off with elves and dwarves and orcs. I don't know. They must have done something.
It seems so, yeah.
But yeah, because even and I suspected this might happen, and I'll leave it for for when we do the discussion of the first book on the Age of Madness.
A little hatred.
Because I'll finish it either later on tonight or tomorrow. But there's a couple of like sort of plot twist there. And it's like, well, yes, but no. Like I wasn't expecting it, but when it came out, I was like, all right, okay, because it's like so grim darkish that you're coming to expect that he would do something like that, even if you don't see it coming. And when it happens, you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's a Joe Abercrombie thing. And we'll talk about it later, but it's sort of losing the appeal or the shock factor because you're expecting it at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't started the book yet. I'm going to start on Monday. I will be done by next Sunday when we discuss it. But I think that it's also a good choice of him to say, like, after this trilogy, The Age of Madness, I'm going to stop and do something new. Because I think that it's difficult to not repeat yourself. And I'm watching House of the Dragon, and without spoiling, people were expecting certain things to happen because they saw Game of Thrones. And in a way, sometimes grimdark becomes predictable. if you go too far into it, if you know like, oh, somebody's going to die of this group of people, because that's what grimdark is, right? So you get into the same mistakes that traditional fantasy, I often say, has, that it is predictable. But when you get into that other type of trope, I feel like grimdark is now something that we see quite a bit, and it's also difficult to keep that fresh, I suppose. Maybe the market is oversaturated in a couple of years and we get a new subgenre and it's going to be new all over again.
Yeah, okay, here's a free idea for one of your videos. The grimdark tropes, right? You're gonna have incest, you're gonna have the unexpected hero death, and I don't know, whatever else is. You've read a lot more than I have, but I think those two sound fairly tropey to me
Yeah.
in that realm there.
Yeah, and one of the things that's difficult then is making you care for people, because if you know that one of them is going to die, or chances are pretty high that, oh, this is a character that's quite sympathetic, they are going to die, it makes it difficult to engage with the character and to really feel for them. You already detach before anything even happens.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm finding a little bit with the first book of Age of Madness. Like some old acquaintances appearing, but it's like, nah, it's hard to really root for or care for these characters because they're not necessarily very nice people, or
Mhm.
they're not going to last the whole thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think for me, in a small doses, is good. I think maybe one trilogy a year or something like that is the right amount of grimdark for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I must say that I was looking at the books that I've read this year, and actually there's not that much grimdark on it. Like the majority is Joe Abercrombie, but other than that, not that much. Which I think is fine for me, because I saw that you were a little bit surprised that I picked up The Last Unicorn, but I
Yeah.
have like some feel good as well. It's like either it's fairy tales or it's grimdark, and there needs to be a balance between the two.
Oh yeah, because you've also read those fairy tale retellings, haven't you? You've done a few of those recently.
Yeah.
Are they? Do those things work? Are they any good?
Sometimes.
Right.
I I feel like it's up and down, because when you label something as fairy tale, it often means that there's something about the writing style, something about the atmosphere that makes it very fairy tale-esque. And with the fairy tale retellings, sometimes that's still there, and sometimes it's just like, oh, let's look at Beauty and the Beast and use that story, but remove all of the beautiful atmosphere, remove all of the magic to it almost. And that can be quite jarring. Like, I'm reading a fairy tale, I know that I'm reading a fairy tale, but it doesn't feel like that. So
Right.
it's a hit or miss.
Okay. Now, you live in Belgium, and after my trip over there this summer, I'm even more jealous, and I wish I would have learned to read, at least read in French, because the tradition of Franco-Belgian comics is super rich. And I walked into, when I was in Brussels, I saw this amazing bookstore. It was a comic bookstore. It's like just the window display was like, wow. So I had to go in, and there's so much stuff going on there that doesn't make it here to Spain, let alone outside of Europe. You got such a vast wealth of. I opened. I don't know what it was all about, but there was this super cool comics about like orcs, dwarves, elves. There was all this, like, like if I lived there or if I spoke French, all my money would go on that. They were just absolutely beautiful things. Don't you read comics?
Well, the the sad part is I should speak French, but I don't. Like, I can say who I am in French. I can introduce myself like basic level, and that's where I'm out. Like, so I only speak Dutch. I was a very big comic book fan when I was growing up, because my parents read comic books. So the Dutch ones I do know. The French ones are a lot more difficult, but often when they are pretty popular in Belgium, they do get the translation to Dutch. Like Tintin is a very famous French one. We do have that in Dutch.
So doesn't it? Okay, excuse my ignorance here, but so you don't have. Obviously, you got pronunciation here. you got Walloon. But what's the provinces? How do you pronounce it?
Well, in Dutch you say Wallonië, but I think
Right,
that's the Walloon region, and then we say Vlaanderen, which is the Flemish region.
the Flemish. Right, okay.
And then we
So
have that small German region that nobody knows, but it is there.
so it's not. Is it not like if something hits big in one language, does it not get quickly translated into the other one?
I must say that I actually don't really know. I think that if it gets really big, yes, but then I think that it also goes international, and that at the very least it would also be translated in French, in English, because the Walloon region and the Flemish region they don't always get along very well.
Yeah. No, I am relatively familiar with.
Yeah, and it's especially because of course the Walloon region is very close to, well, France, so I it's natural that they feel more connected to that because they have a shared language, and then we are close to the Netherlands. So I think that there is like more connection than between our two halves of the country, which can also be just because I don't know French and I don't really watch the news that much. So maybe there are things that I just don't know about, but I don't think that there's like a very easy connection between the two.
Yeah. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but then Brussels is a bit of a weird place, isn't it? Because it's in which region is it? It's in
It's
the Dutch region, but they
it's
speak French in Brussels. It's kind of like a pocket of French in the middle of the rest, isn't it?
it's very weird because it depends. Like we have three levels, and I don't even know how to explain it in English, but it depends on what you're looking at. Because sometimes Brussels is just a part of one of the two, and sometimes it's a part that stands on its own. So it's not a part of the Walloon region, it's not a part of the Flemish region, it's just something like independent in the middle, which is also why they should be bilingual. Well, trilingual, I suppose. They should speak French, Dutch, and German, especially in the official instances. If you go to the city hall or the town hall, they should speak all three. Often they only speak one, which is French,
Yeah.
which is also understandable because if everybody around you speaks French, but often it's a problem. So it's, yeah, it can get pretty heated when people talk about Brussels and what it's actually a part of.
Yeah. No. It's yeah. I mean, because my friend, one of my childhood friends, lives in Brussels there, but he functions in French. I mean, he works for the European Commission,
Mhm.
and Dutch is not the easiest language in the world. I mean, I lived in the Netherlands. I lived in Amsterdam for a few months, many years back, and the problem is that over there you can function perfectly in English. So, and
Yeah.
everyone speaks and everything. So, yeah,
Mhm.
it's a strange
I
setup.
I always think that a big part of it is, and I don't know if I'm correct, and I don't know if everybody else thinks this, but we don't dub our movies. We see it in English, and then we have the subtitles. While France and the Walloon region, they do dub it, and I think that because of that, they actually don't know English that well.
Same here. It's the same. So the Scandinavian countries is the same. They've got their own, Norway, Sweden. They speak Norwegian, Swedish, but when I was there, you can watch TV no problem, unless it's a Norwegian production
Hmm.
or a Swedish production. But you can watch telly. When I was in Amsterdam, the same story. If it was an American movie, you could just watch it on the telly. Here in Spain, they dub everything. So we're playing catch up with the English now.
Hmm.
Um, Plus, we've got our fair share of regional languages, which is a pain in and of itself. Um, so, like, I cannot work in my. I'm a teacher, but I cannot work as a teacher here in a state school in the region that I am at because I don't speak the local language.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm stuck in my job. So it's quite irritating. And then
Yeah.
we've got Catalan, Valenciano, Galician, Basque. Yeah. There's
It's a lot, yeah. And that's sometimes annoying because I often think, why can not just everybody speak English? If instead of like here you should speak French, you should speak German, you should speak Dutch, then in a different country you should speak Spanish and all the other variants. But why not just teach everybody English? But I know that it's not as simple as that. But I think sometimes that would be easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think eventually English would become the de facto international language if it isn't already.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's probably coming more and more because, of course, the internet has been around for a long time. But I think that the more that it's around and the more that people get on forums and that it's really a big international community, English really is the language that everybody uses. So I think that you're right. In the future, over time, everybody is going to speak English at some point.
yeah. I mean, what was it? Last summer, we drove down to where my parents are. They live down south, and my wife, she can get by in Spanish, but she's not fully fluent. And we stopped over at a shopping center on the way for lunch, and we went to, I think it was a McDonald's there. And my wife started trying to order in Spanish, and then the cashier was just, don't worry, and started talking to her in English. And I'm thinking, wow, even to work at McDonald's now, you need to be bilingual here.
Mhm.
That's the boat we're setting.
Yeah, and
But
I at the same time, I sometimes I like how people try to help you, and I do the same thing. If I see somebody struggling in Dutch, I switch to English. But sometimes I also think maybe I should let them struggle because if I'm struggling in French, let me stumble, but I will learn from it. I think that switching to English the entire time is the reason why I can't speak French, for instance. You're muted, Jose.
sorry, I've done it again. Sorry. No, I was saying that surely the reason my wife's Spanish isn't better is because sometimes, just for the sake of communication and getting the conversation done, we just talk in English because I haven't got the patience to hear her stumble through the words. This is like, no, okay, let's just get it out of the way. I'm not the
Mhm.
most patient person in the
Yeah,
world,
but
I suppose.
I can understand, and also, of course, on a daily basis, it's you can't do it with somebody who's not fluently speaking. You almost have to switch to a language that you're both fluent at, because
Yeah,
otherwise, well, especially
that's
if you
right.
have children, you need to know and make sure that you're both on the same page.
But yeah, except for my kids, they've got preference for English, even though we live here now, but they go to a British school. So their education is, I don't know, 70% in English, and at home, when they hear us talk, is in English, even though to them I speak in Spanish.
Mhm.
But I think my 7-year-old certainly has got preference for English. The little one still is still figuring out his way in the world. Um, but so another shocking discovery when I was in Belgium was the gift shops. Now, typically, when you go to a gift shop in any civilized country in the world, all they sell is pencils and fridge magnets. In Belgium, they sell beer and beer glasses,
Of course.
and I was amazed. It was absolutely fantastic. Like the beer culture there is like something I've never seen before. It's just, I mean, you guys are so lucky.
Yeah, definitely. And then I'm the one who only like drinks fruity beers, so I don't even know if that counts.
Uh,
But we do have quite a bit of a collection of that, and I can pick and choose between it. While in other countries, I recently just went to the Netherlands and I ordered something like this, and it was like 6 7 euros. And when I order it here, it's 3. So I thought, like, is that transport costs? It's the Netherlands. It's not that far away. So
yeah.
very lucky in that aspect.
No. For a beer lover, it is certainly the place to go. Although I have to say, I felt a little bit dirty. I felt a little bit disgusted. I got on the train because when I was there, I went to St. Sixtus Abbey to try the beer there because you can only buy it there. We went to Leuven, some da da da. And then my friend's girlfriend was like, "Have you ever been to Bruges?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, no, I've never been to Bruges." So you've come all the way to Belgium to go and drink fucking beer at an abbey in the middle of Flanders, but you haven't been to Bruges. I was like, "No." So you gotta go. So fine, okay. So following morning, get myself a train ticket. I get on the train. Everyone on the train was Spanish. Like we got off at the train station, and there was just a river of people walking towards the town center, and everyone around me was speaking Spanish. It's like, what are we doing here?
What was there a football match by any
No,
chance?
no, it was just the middle of the summer holidays, and
That's the only thing that I can think of, but
no, 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 no. That was weird. Yeah, far too many people in the
Bruges is
streets.
probably like everybody knows Brussels. That's probably where you arrive if you come to Belgium as a tourist. But other than that, I think that Bruges is probably the most well known city. So they definitely have their share of tourists as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like it. I like it a lot. I've got. I really liked Leuven. I've got like one of my students now. He's off to university next year, and he doesn't know where to go. And he was showing me his list of possible universities. And when I saw Leuven there, I was like, mate, stop thinking. Like,
Just
like this is the place. It's such a cool town.
yeah,
I'm assuming you've been there.
I did my master's there, so I'm a little bit aware of the place and what it's like to be a student in Leuven.
And now that no one is listening, what is it like being a student in Leuven?
Well, to be honest, at this point, so my my academic career was a little bit rocky. I started my bachelor's as a bioengineer in Leuven, but I went for 2 months. Then I switched to law school. I went for 1 month, and then I decided that I actually didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I waited for a year. Then I went to Hasselt for my bachelor's. And then by the time that I went back to Leuven, I was already living together with my husband. In my second master's, I got married. So like the true student life, I haven't
Uh,
really experienced that. But on Thursdays, everybody goes out. So most faculties don't plan classes on Fridays or Friday mornings at the very least because nobody's going to arrive.
Brilliant. Sounds like my kind of town. Yeah, no, no. When I was walking around there, I was like, yeah, like if I could live my life again, or if my kids at some point in the future were that way inclined, I would certainly encourage them to
Mhm.
go there.
Yeah, I do think that for Leuven, it's a different attitude, I suppose. And I think that when I first got there as an 18-year-old, I come from a very small town. So at that point, I had never driven the bus for it. Well, I didn't drove it. I never took the bus, I suppose, or something like that on my own. So going to Leuven, where you have the different faculties, but they're like scrambled through town and you need to find your own way. And you can have physics in Heverlee, which is like 5 kilometers from Leuven, and then you have to be fast enough to go to the other class. It was too much for me. I think that I wasn't mature enough at the time. So when I went to Hasselt, which is you have one street, and that's one street with dorm rooms, and then you have one building, and that's where you have class. So it was very boring after a while, but I thought that for me, it was also a good transition.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you would call it. I think it's about 250,000 people. That's the town where I come from in Spain. But realistically,
That's big.
you always moved around the same 8 streets, so they're about all my friends. We all live within walking distance to the school and so on. And I always felt that I had a little bit of imposter syndrome when I eventually moved to London, and I was working in London. I never quite felt that I fitted in the place. It was always a bit of a shock to walk down, I don't know, Oxford Street or Regent Street, or come out of, you know, the Bank of England and walk down the Strand towards Waterloo Bridge. I was like, what am I doing here? Like, yeah, I don't know. Which I
I
think,
I probably wouldn't have survived if I went to another country. Like Leuven is still pretty close to where I live, and I already had a hard time going to London. Oh, no, it would be trouble. But I guess that you learn a lot from those experiences as well.
yeah, but I don't know. Like when I left Spain when I was 18, I was like really fed up of being in my hometown. I was bored. It's always the same thing, same places. So when I had the opportunity to go, I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. But I've got friends that have stayed, and they literally live 3 streets down from where they grew up, and they still got their parents around, and now they got kids, and their kids go to the same school that we went to. And I think there's a certain, to me at least, they seem like they have a certain happiness and a certain joy there that I kind of have missed out because I've traveled around and I've been around different places. So it's a bit of give and take, and it's
Mhm.
possibly what I didn't want when I was 18 is what kind of my wife certainly wants now. Is that feeling of being settled, that you belong somewhere and you've got your
Yeah. Mhm.
circle and your network around. And I think I sort of I didn't want it, and when I didn't have it, I felt out of place.
Mhm. Yeah, it's crazy how you when you're 18, you need to make a decision for the rest of your life, but when you think back on how you were when you were 18, you weren't thinking about the long term. Even if you thought you were, you just don't know.
You don't know, and it's hard. And people tell you you don't know, and you don't want to hear. So
Mhm.
um, you have to make your own mistakes, isn't it?
Yeah, and maybe that's just in my circle, but I also felt that people are putting a lot of pressure on academics, and like if you can do a certain thing, if you can go to university, go. If you can do something in science, do that because that's better than something else. And now I see other people who they were 18, they started a job or they did a bachelor's but not a master's, and they were settled so much faster than me. And I feel like people should also just value other things in life. Just then, like, if you can do this, just go. Always like shoot for the highest possibility. No, also stop and think what you actually like. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should.
No, that's very true, but it's very difficult. I mean, I'm on my second career, so teaching wasn't my first career, and even within that, this is the third school I've worked for. So I've worked for two schools in the UK. Now I'm here. I think I'm here for good now, unless
Mhm.
something major happens. Um, but it is very difficult to know what you want to do. I don't know, jobs that exist now that didn't exist 20 years ago. Uh, so like now thinking, oh God, I did that. I studied economics. I had a career in finance, but I've always thought, oh no, maybe I wanted to be a computer programmer because it's kind of that sort of logic following mind that you need to have. And I don't know,
Yeah,
eventually,
it's always what you don't have is what you want, and it's with most things, and sometimes you just need to be content with what you have. I always say, like, if I knew what I know now, I wouldn't have done a PhD. And then I have friends of mine who did a bachelor's who say, if I could have, I would have done a master's. So it's always you see the negatives of your life and the positive of someone else's, but you can't compare the two because you've only lived one.
yeah. I these days because I've got like a 35 minute drive to school, but it's all through these very secondary roads. There's hardly ever any traffic, and I'm driving through valleys of orange trees. And as I'm driving home some days in the evening, I'm going, God, work with this, that, the other. You know, I haven't got this, that, the other. I should do this, that, the other for the kids and everything. And then sometimes I'm driving, I need to look around and I look at the hills and I look at the orange trees, and then the valley opens and I can see the sea. And I go, huh, maybe things are not that bad, right? And you got to start rethinking about what's actually going well and what's actually nice about
Mhm.
where we are and what we have. Um, but it's a constant battle. It's a
Mhm.
constant process. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that it's very important sometimes to just like take a step back, look at your life, and be like, It's it's always easy to look in hindsight, but it could have been worse, right? Like try to be content with what you have, and don't second guess and be like, oh, if I could have done it all over again, but yeah, but you can't. So let's just look at the positive.
Yeah, and actually, that doesn't mean you have to settle and stop trying, isn't it?
Yeah,
But yeah, sort of
exactly.
appreciate what you have. So, completely changing topic here again. I'm just remembering bits of conversation. So, I had the sudden spark of realization. So, hang on, let me thread this properly. Of the exchanges you've had around your channel and Discord and stuff like that, Have you had any or any particular like negative or nasty exchanges with anyone?
Well, it's actually been pretty okay. On Discord, I had a couple of trolls, which, I mean, it wasn't like they were targeting me. They were just targeting everyone. So is that a pleasant conversation? No. But if I didn't have a channel, it would have probably been the same. On my channel, it's pretty okay. The only thing is usually when I say something negative about a series, there are some people who are super understanding. You're like, I like the series, but I can see why you don't like it. And then you always have the people who get personally offended. It feels like they feel so attached to the series that if you attack the series, they feel like they get attacked. So they need to like hit you back. And one of the things is I'm either too stupid, so I don't understand what I'm reading. And the Wheel of Time franchise definitely treated me that way because I talked negatively about Prince of Thorns. Shadia mentioned that that was like another grim dark series that I've read this year. I really hated that one. And a lot of people who read that say that it's their favorite series of all time, but they can see why I have difficulties with it. So they are super understanding, super polite about talking about it. But Wheel of Time, whew, that was a different matter. And I think that part of it is, of course, also because nobody or a very small percentage of people is looking up like Prince of Thorns review. Like Wheel of Time, when you put that in your title, everybody's coming to it, even people who don't know you. So you also have the annoying people who say that you're stupid. And then one of the things that also happened, which I don't know if it was meant in a negative way, but I got a little bit annoyed by it, was I read Robin Hobb and I started in Dutch, which is a translation. And I said that I thought that the translator didn't do a good job because I switched to the audiobooks, I switched to the English version, and I thought that it was much better. And somebody said in a very sarcastic way, like, oh, yeah, maybe you should translate it and maybe you should contact them and they'd be happy to have you if you can do it better. And I thought, well, we're reviewing here, right? That's the entire point of reviewing. I'm not saying that I can write. I'm not saying that I can do it better, but I can still see if it's done well or not. I can't cook for the life of me. But if you give me a steak that's like burnt, I can tell you that that's not how it should be. So I found that a very annoying comment, and I still think about that, even though it's been almost a year. So
Well, okay. Maybe you need to let that one go now. But yeah, because like I think I was talking to Chris or Charles. It was like, yeah, I actually think that the average fantasy reader seems to be a bit more intelligent than your average person. Like you don't get those ridiculous exchanges that I've seen in other channels. Like like I follow boxing, not like fully, but I do enjoy the boxing channels. And sometimes there you get those ridiculous arguments where like, no, you're so and so, no, your mom this and that. No, it's like, oh my god, okay. And
yeah.
you don't see much of that
Mhm.
around Booktube.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's why, like, if you have even a semi mean comment, it sticks out because most people are really intelligent, are really nice, and they can watch your video and put it with a. I guess that they can put it in perspective. But I don't know if you've got any negative comments because you disliked Wheel of Time as well, and I suppose that those videos get quite a bit of traffic as well. So.
No, because I think I've always tried to reason why I don't like something. I don't try to just crap all over something and that's it. Like um particularly my video on, here's why the Wheel of Time sucks. I went through the list of whatever, and I think mostly people were like, "Yeah, the Wheel of Time sucks. I agree with you," and some people were like, "I still like it, but I can see your point." I
Mhm,
think I've never really had. I don't think I've ended up having any super. I don't remember anything, and
mhm,
like the super negative stuff, like you just said, sticks to you, isn't it? You remember it, but I don't think that. The bit that I find frustrating is when I try to engage with people and they don't reply back. And
mhm,
even like there's a couple of booktubers there that I was following because I liked what they did and how they presented. But if I disagree with them, they would just ignore that comment, or they would reply once, and when I replied again, there was no more. That was the
mhm.
end. Like they
Yeah.
couldn't handle or they didn't want to handle or face the different opinion, and I
Mhm.
felt a bit disappointed with that.
Yeah, I can totally relate with that. And I think that that's also the angle that you approach booktube. Like for me, and I think that for you it's the same, you want to engage with people and you want to have that conversation, because otherwise I would just be talking to myself in a room without my camera on and I would have the same result. So the point is the comments, the point is seeing what other people think and maybe change my perspective even. So if I feel like somebody's not doing that, and it's like, oh, they like that you have a comment because that's better for their analytics, but they don't really care what you've written, I usually tap out pretty quickly with those channels. And when
Yeah.
they're extremely big, I can understand because it's impossible to react to everyone. And then I just watch them without the personal interaction, which is why I usually watch smaller booktubers more because I really like that. But then I understand why they don't respond. But if it's really that they just only talk to the people who say that they're right and they don't really want to have a critical conversation, yeah, I usually tap out because that's not what I'm looking for on Booktube.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I don't know, like I've got a recent couple of experiences where I don't know what to make of it. So like I have some exchanges with people, and it's all going well, and I go, hey, let's do this. Let's have a live stream. Let's have a conversation, and then silence. That's it. Like there's no more communication, and it's like, oh,
That's
why?
weird.
What? Yeah, I don't know. That has that happened to you?
I usually, well, do you mean that you ask them for a conversation or that they ask you?
No, I've asked them because like we may have like a three, four, five different exchanges on the comment section, and it's like, hey, there's material here for a conversation. Let's let's organize something,
Mhm.
and then the line goes dead.
Yeah. Well, I've never had that, but I also don't do a lot of lives. So I usually do it with people that I know because I'm sometimes too stressed out and too nervous to do it with people that I don't know. So I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. It could either be that it's something like that, that they're just nervous to do something like that. But I've also ex- well, sometimes I see people who only try to have like a collaboration with channels who are bigger than them, and that's usually something that I also quite dislike because then you see like a hidden agenda behind it.
Mm,
Like why would you do it like that? Then it's almost like you see it as a career, you see it as a step up instead of just a fun conversation, which you can have with just about everyone. But I've never experienced it because I don't ask people.
right, 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 right. Yeah, no, no, I'll take your point. Yeah, and no one has to be as unafraid as me, I suppose, of
Mhm.
disagreeing. And to be honest, like we've had disagreements in the past when we've done conversations on first law, this, that, the other, and you know, the blood doesn't need to flow, does it? It's just
Yeah, of course. It's we know that it's just books, right? It's not like if you hate the book that I like, I'm not shutting down the conversation and think like, oh, Jose, what a horrible person.
yeah,
He
yeah.
hates Red Country, and I love it. So it's fine, but I guess that maybe some people are more stressed out about that.
Yeah. Is there any big no-nos for you? Like when you watch someone, any particular something they say you do in the content, when you go, oh, actually, I'm done with you. Like, is there any particular things that make you just shut off from someone?
There's not that much, to be honest. Well, if they say something extremely horrible, which probably would make everybody tap out. But other than that, usually it's just I watch somebody's videos for their personality, and even if they switch genres, like there are some booktubers that I watch that read barely fantasy or they read a lot of fantasy that I don't like, but I like who they are and I just like watching their videos for comfort. And sometimes it's even better if they don't read fantasy because then I don't add books to my TBR. But when I start feeling that they I like when people talk to the camera as if, well, I'm just a person. You who are watching is also just a person. Let's just talk. Sometimes, and that's especially with the bigger channel, so they don't even know who I am. They start talking like they're like more than the viewer. They start talking like they're like a star. They have that feeling, and that's sometimes when I tap out, just because I don't feel that connection anymore. But that's not because they say something wrong. That's just because something's very specific that I'm looking for.
Yeah, do you think that some channels fall victim to their success?
I think so. Yeah, there are definitely some. Well, Daniel Green. I loved watching him when he was smaller. Now I don't watch him anymore, and I know that what he does works perfectly for the majority of people. Well, his channel has blown up, so but it's just not what I'm looking for. And when he was smaller, it felt just more cozy. It felt like just a guy who had a camera, and he talked about books because he liked to. And now it's his job, and that's not a bad thing. It's just something that I don't like.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned the channel, isn't it? He's the guy that has made it out of Booktube. But you're right. I think there was a certain, or maybe he has become an entry point into Booktube,
Also
and
true.
because now he doesn't. I'm not subscribed, but now it doesn't even come into my feed. Like I've really couldn't care any less anymore because of late, I think he's been very. I say of late, when the Wheel of Time show came out and with the Rings of Power, I could sense that he was trying to be. He was sitting on the fence. He didn't want to outright, perhaps, say what he truly thought, and then
Mhm.
that's why you say it's become artificial. Like if you're gonna be honest about something,
Yeah, exactly.
what are you gonna be honest about?
Hmm.
And
And
then it's gone.
and I also don't want to say that that's how they feel because I don't know, but that's just how I perceive it. And once you start thinking that, it's like when June came out. It came out in Europe faster than it came out in the rest of the world. So I could have the chance to talk about that movie. And if I did that when it came out, I probably would have gotten a lot of views. But I'm not somebody who talks about movies. I don't know anything about it. I don't know directors. I don't know about music. I just watched the movie once. I know that I like it, and that's it. So I didn't do that. But when it then came out, everybody was talking about it. And sometimes I can see these are people who love the book, who are now watching the movie. They have a very critical response about it, and you can see that they're passionate about it. Sometimes I felt like they were talking about it because they knew that that was going to give them views. And it's the same thing with House of the Dragon now and Rings of Power. You see some people really milking that out almost. And if that works for them and if that's something that they like doing, they should. It's not my channel, it's theirs. But that's the moment when I feel like, this is not what I'm looking for on Booktube.
Yeah, and which brings me to my next point there, which I think part of me resents, possibly quite irrationally, but it's when then and I've seen it not just in fantasy, they build a big audience, and then it's like, oh, and here's my book that I've written,
Mm.
and it's like, oh, mate, like just because you read a lot doesn't necessarily mean you can write. Obviously helps, but where did you stand on indie books, indie authors? I mean, everyone has to start somewhere for sure, but do you
Mhm.
read much of that?
I read some, especially because Steve reads a lot of indie. So when he says, like, okay, this is a great book, you're going to love it, I usually dive into it. But, and there are some like Ash and Sand trilogy by Richard Nell. It's at this point I think it's my favorite grim dark. I love that one, and it's self-published. It's indie for sure. But you can't deny that everybody can self-publish if they want to. If I want to, I can do it tomorrow. I need to have a little bit of money, of course, but I don't need to hire an editor. I don't need to make sure that there are multiple beta readers. I don't need to do any of that. So you have the perfectly crafted books of people who, for whatever reason, didn't get a deal with the publisher or who want to keep everything in their own hands, which is perfectly valid as well. But then you also have the people who just really don't write that well. And to find those hidden gems is something that I don't have the time for. I'm going to be honest here. I read at this point maybe 4 books a month. I'm not going to read 3 bad ones to find one good one. So I wait until somebody that I trust tells me, this is a book that you're going to like, and then I'll pick it up. And of course, you also have traditionally published books that I think, how did this pass an editor? How did a publisher pick this one up? But the risk is a little bit smaller, I suppose. And I don't know how you think about that, but
Yeah, it's that old saying, isn't it? You gotta kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. And I don't read that much. I haven't got that much time. So I want some kind of guarantee.
Mhm.
Um I may not like the book, right? But I want it to be well written.
Mhm.
I don't want amateurish writing. Like uh
Yeah. Shadia said that she would read Philip Chase's book and not Daniel Green's one. And I'm exactly the same. Like Philip Chase is somebody that I can trust. He puts his life work into it. It's his passion, and he is an English professor. He knows so much about reading and about the history of fantasy. And I also think that he's a perfectionist. So even if it gets self-published, he's the type of author that I want to give a try, because I have more trust into him than some traditionally published authors. And
yeah, I mean, sorry, go on, sorry.
so yeah, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. But Daniel Green, and I don't want to hate on the guy because he seems very nice. But I've seen so many people review his books where I'm also thinking like everybody is reviewing his book. Like it's also like people know that Daniel Green is going to be put in the search bar, so let's review his book, which is also, if you want to do that, that's fine. But I've seen so many negative reviews that I'm not saying that it's bad, but that's not one where I'm going to take the risk. And that's nothing against him. Maybe it's great. Maybe if I pick it up, it's a 5-star read. But I know that the odds are against it. While with Philip Chase, I really think that I'm going to love his works.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, in my past life, I did write. What did I write? 3 books?
Oh,
3 books? 4 books. I wrote 2 anthologies of horror stories and 2 novels. But before kids, I had a bit more money, so I actually did pay someone to read through and do an editing job because I wanted to do the best job I could, and that meant that because at one point I was contemplating going down the self-publishing route or doing something with it, but I wanted to put the best thing I could out there. And so I paid, and literally I was paying hundreds for someone to go and edit and change and suggest and comment. And I don't know if these people are doing that. And it makes a big difference.
yeah, and that's why it's so diverse. You have people who really put their everything that they have into it, and they do all of the effort of hiring an editor, hiring beta readers. I now have, arcs of people who have self-published who tell me the entire process. But then you also have people who just self-publish. So you have both of them, and it's very difficult at a glance, if you don't know the author, to know what kind of person they are. But more important question that Shadia has: under what name did you publish?
I never got round to it. It was
Oh.
no. The story goes, I wrote the first one. It was a novel. But I was living in London at the time. But I had written it in Spanish. I never felt comfortable enough to write in English. So then I got those kind of co-publishing deals where they will put half the money, I'll put half the money, and they will guarantee that the book will get to like the big bookstores in Spain and the big chains. But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, yeah, it's great that people could go to here in Spain, Casa del Libro. It's like the big, chain of bookstores nationwide. But I was thinking, who's gonna pick it up from the shelf? Like it's gonna sit
Mhm.
there, and I'm gonna have to front all this money, and I'm living in London, so I cannot go around promoting it. I cannot attend because they would organize like a book launch and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, I can spend a few hundred for an editor, forking out 2-3 grand to give myself an ego trip and pretend that I was a published author. I had the money, but I never quite, I couldn't see myself following through because just the circumstances weren't there. So, like I said, I wrote a couple of novels, a couple of horror anthologies, and then that's it. Then the kids came, and life
Yeah.
just. I'm reincarnated now. I'm living a different life now.
But do you still write now, even if it's just for yourself?
No,
Don't have the time anymore.
I've got, and I feel guilty about this. Where is it? Here. So, I think this was last Christmas present for my wife, and she got one for my parents as well. And it's titled, so I'm translating by Dear Dad, Between You and Me. And it's all about like little prompts to get you to write about your life and then pass it on to your kids. So, like, I've just opened a page at random, and something like, what plans did you have when you were dating, or what did you want to be when you grew up, all that kind of stuff. And it's still blank. I haven't written a single page, and it's here on my shelf, and I feel bad. It's like, oh, I should get up in the mornings. I should, instead of getting up and reading like I do every morning at 6 a.m, I should sit down and just write a couple of things for the kids. But I suspect they're still quite young, so I still got time. Maybe when they are 20, 25.
When they're out of the house.
Yeah, it'll be the time to give it to them, or maybe the time when they have their own kids. But it's one of those projects. And then my wife also got me many years ago. It's another book. It's called 642 Things to Write About. So it's like, prompts about, crazy stuff. But that's when I used to write, and I don't write anymore. I know they say we all have a book inside of us. So have you ever had the itch? Have you ever been tempted to commit pen to paper?
Never. But I have like zero creativity in me. So I read because I cannot imagine these things on my own. And it's one of those things that I've also mentioned, and sometimes it's difficult, but I think that I don't picture things in my head like most readers do. And it's a thing, right? It's aphasia or something like that. I think I have that. I read stuff, and if I don't have it 100%, but I need to like close the book, and then if I try, I can picture the setting, I can picture the surroundings, I can think about how the people look. But while I'm reading, I can't imagine anything in my head. And I think that maybe that's something that you need if you want to be an author. You need to have a good imagination, and you need to be able to picture the scenes that you have. And I can't do that. So I always say I read because I can't make it up myself.
That's weird. So when you're reading whatever, are you not seeing it in your head?
Because I know with one of the Joe Abercrombie books, you said, well, that city, that was the city that we have in Spain with the high buildings and all of that. And I was thinking, I don't remember, because scenes like that, they just go over my head way too easily because I can't picture it. I really need to close the book, try very hard, and then I can do that. But it's too much for me, so I don't do that usually.
Interesting. I mean, back to the whole writing thing. I mean, the one thing, the one piece of advice you always get is write about what you know. Because if you don't know anything about sailing and you write a book about boats, anyone that knows a little bit about sailing is going to catch you out, right? Which is maybe why fantasy is an easier genre to write in, because you are creating the world. You are the expert of that world. You are the only one that knows about that, potentially. So maybe there's that. But no, like the first book I wrote was just an accumulation of experiences I had in London about the loneliness of being surrounded by millions of people. And it was that sort of thing. And then I edited it. I printed like 20 copies, did like a proper edition, gave it to family and friends and stuff like that. So it's overcoming that sense of this embarrassment. Like, I've written this.
Yeah.
here it is. And then I got a lot of flack because I suppose to a degree I did write my experiences in that book through the eyes of different people. So I was accused of like, oh, which one are you in the book? So then the next one, I thought, well, fuck it, I'm just going to write horror here. So I just wrote, you know, bad pastiche copies of Lovecraft and Cthulhu and stuff like that, so that I couldn't be accused of having written myself in the book. So I don't know. It's once you start writing, you realize how bloody hard it is. It will take me years to write an 80,000 page book, literally years, because obviously you got your work commitments and stuff. But then if you're not in the mood for recording a 10-minute video, imagine sitting down to write 2,000 words. It's
It's insane, yeah. Well, what I'm wondering, because I didn't know you were an author, but with that in mind, do you review books differently? Because I often hear reviewers say like, I'm not going to review a book negatively because I know that it will hurt the author or something like that. And I'm always pretty harsh about that, but maybe when you're an author, you can relate more.
no, I've done. I mean, I did a review this year about a Spanish author. He wrote up. I met him at a Comic Con. He sold me the spiel. I bought the book, and it must have been one of those semi-professional publishing, but it was bad. It was bad. And I have to always preface the whole thing with, I know how hard it is to write, you know, but just because it's a bit like I'm a teacher, right? And sometimes with these kids, it's the same thing. Just because you sat down for hours on end doesn't mean you're going to get good grades in the exam. It still may be shit, right? As a runner, I also know it doesn't matter how many hours I spend running there, I'm never going to be the world champion of anything. So you need to know your limits, and sometimes a book's just bad. So I've done three outright this is awful reviews, but as usual I've tried to give my reasons for it.
Hmm.
It's either the writing style or the chosen perspective. I remember it was one of my very first videos, it doesn't even have a name. I think it's the Vagrant trilogy, and I met the author and he signed the book for me and we talked about it, but he chose to write it's all in the present tense, which is already weird, and the main protagonist is a mute. So how are you going to convey any kind of inner turmoil? How are you going to communicate any kind of observation about the world when you're writing in the present tense through the point of view of it's like, this is shit, right? This is absolutely terrible. And then he broke quite a few cardinal rules of writing along the way, and it was just bad.
Hmm.
But hey, someone, some big publisher, either HarperCollins or Orbit,
Oh.
someone put it out there. So what do I know?
Hmm. Yeah, it's. I always try to like view who is watching my videos and why do I make a review and why do I watch reviews. It's like books are pretty expensive and they are also a time investment. So if I look at a review, I want to know, is it worth my money? And I always expect a reviewer to have that in mind. Like, is a reader going to like this? So I always feel a little bit iffy when people say like, oh, I won't review anything negative because I don't want to hurt the author. Because I always feel like that's not the job of a reviewer. You shouldn't like help an author make sales. And that doesn't mean that I'm not sympathetic of his dreams. But if I now say I want to be a basketball player, well, I'm 5 feet tall. I cannot become a basketball player. It's just not in me. I can train, but it's not going to happen. If you want to become an author, you can do that as a hobby. But to become a professional, you need to have talent. And I'm not saying that I will be the judge of that, but if I don't like it, I'm going to say it. And as a channel that has a little bit over 1,000 subs, if I'm the only one who dislikes it, it's not going to hurt you. But I also don't feel like we owe you your life dream.
No, my take on it is, I've given you the money. Like, I've bought your book.
Yeah.
I've got the right to say whether I like it or not. I don't have to like it. But yeah, I mean, I suppose we are small enough that we don't have to worry about it, which is back to the whole Daniel Green thing. It's very
Mhm.
rare that he will give a negative review, and then when he does, maybe now you're gonna start wondering why that is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's why I like small booktubers most of all, because they also just try to take a risk at times and pick up a book that nobody has heard of, and they talk about it because they want to talk about it. And it's like that genuine approach to reading books and talking about it that I just really like. And from the minute that I start feeling like it's a little bit troubled by other agendas, I usually tap out.
Yeah, this one particular guy. I don't want to name names because he's kind of around in the circle, but he did this. Oh, my top 10 fantasy book recommendations. Where I was like, all right, okay, let's check this out. 3 books into it, he's recommending books he hasn't read.
Oh,
And I said,
that's weird.
why?
Yeah.
What are you doing, mate? You just like. Uh, I think there's an element of chasing trends and people kind of riding the wave of whatever is the most talked about thing out there at the moment, and that's not for me. I think because some books I think get over hyped because they're the most recent release,
Mhm.
so everyone is talking about them, and now I've got to stop and think: is it because of that, or is this book actually any good at all?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's also part of like maybe my reading slump at the time. I was reading a lot of new releases because I wanted to review them for people and be honest about them. But reading a book that nobody else has talked about is a risk. And it's there are great new releases and there are bad ones. And sometimes when you look at new release reviews, it seems like everybody loves them. And then I read them and I think, oh, I don't know. So it's a little bit difficult. But I guess that it's what you look for on Booktube, because there are a lot of people that I see and they grow their channels incredibly fast, and they have like the beautiful thumbnails. They're a little bit clickbaity. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not as genuine as somebody with just a crappy thumbnail who doesn't really care too much.
No, but I am with Shadia there. I tend to watch reviews of books or series I've already read.
Mhm.
I think because like I may read Malasan or Malasan, as it's actually pronounced, next year, but I don't want to know anything about it because I want to appreciate it for myself and I don't want it to be spoiled.
Mhm.
So what am I saying? Why am I saying this? That if you're reviewing recent releases, who's watching that? Like who's watching potentially? And what's the point of doing a review that is spoiler free? How can you
Mm.
actually discuss it and unpick it properly without going through what makes it work or doesn't? I don't get that either.
Hmm. That's an interesting approach, and I guess that that also depends on what you consider spoilers, because I know Steve, he talks about books and he talks about them spoiler free, and his reviews are very short because he says I don't want to talk about any spoilers. I'm not going to give you a lot of the premise. I like to go into books as blind as possible, and I want you to do that as well. So he just talks about, well, very general things of I like the characters or I didn't like them. I thought that the pacing was okay. So very general because that's what he likes. And he considers anything more specific than that a spoiler. While if I do a spoiler free review, and I don't do too many of them because they do take quite a bit of time, but it can easily be 20 minutes because I don't consider it needs to be a pretty specific already for me to consider it a spoiler. So I'm not going to talk about specific scenes. I'm not going to say certain people die or not, but I can talk about a certain romance that's happening or about plot twists that I didn't see coming. And some people say, well, you talked about a plot twist, so now I know that something is coming, so I consider that a spoiler. I don't go that far. So it depends. And but what Shadia says and what you says as well, I either need to be extremely interested in a book to watch a spoiler-free review, so I know if it's something for me or not. If somebody says it's very fast-paced, there's a lot of action, and it's plot-driven, I'm not going to pick it up because I like slow and boring books about the characters. So that's usually something that I do try to watch for before I buy a book. But otherwise, I always watch reviews of books that I've already read, which is funny because then why are they spoiler free? Why don't we focus on spoiler filled
But
discussions?
maybe I'm just too stupid and I haven't got the capacity. Because if you're going to do a spoiler free review, all you're going to do is say whether you liked it or not, or be
Yes.
pretty vague and generic, like you said. It's action packed, or it's character driven, and I really loved it, and that leaves me a bit empty and a bit cold. It's like, well,
Hmm.
why? That's a fairly sort of generic.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's also a reason why reviews don't do that well. And it's something that I have tried to step away from, well, the last couple of months, the last year, I should say, just because making an in-depth review that is spoiler free goes a little bit besides the point. If you haven't read the book, you just want to know if it's good or not and why somebody liked it or not. And you can discuss that in a wrap up, or you can do that in a rapid review. Like, I'm going to talk about 3 grimdark books that I've recently read. I'm going to tell you why I like them or not in 5 minutes. So the long spoiler free reviews that I used to do, they don't do well because nobody who hasn't read the book wants to hear you talk about the book for 20 minutes. So I start thinking now maybe I should do the spoiler filled ones because people who have read it, they are going to be interested in that. And that's a very small audience, but for those people, it will be interesting.
I think those are the ones where you're gonna get the most potential engagement out of, where people are gonna be able to agree or disagree with you when you unpick something, or I hated this or I love this because of XYZ. um Sorry, I keep coughing. I've got this rubbish cold that I had for
Oh.
almost a month now, and I'm just giving up on it. I'm just carrying on with my life, and yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so like that's what's going to generate the engagement. I think if you
Hmm.
go, I've just finished my lesson, really liked it, great characters.
Yeah.
I
People
don't
don't really know what to expect besides that. And that's well, I'm trying to re-evaluate the entire channel now and what I look for Booktube as a viewer. But for instance, Malazan, I did my Gardens of the Moon spoiler free review, and I think that's if I would do spoiler free reviews in the future, it would probably be with a very specific goal in mind. Like for Malazan, I wanted to make sure that people who are afraid to pick it up know what people mean when they say it's dense or you don't know what's going on, just to put people at ease, like it's not that difficult, they actually mean this or that's how I have experienced it. But to just say like, oh, I've read this book, let's do a spoiler free review, I don't think that adds any value. And then I think that the wrap ups or a rapid review is much more valuable.
Yeah, that's if you read enough books in a month, isn't it? If like me, you're lucky and you read two. Um, yeah, those kind of videos don't work for me. I kind of do monthly wrap ups because
I don't know if one is going to happen in October for me because I'm reading a lot less as well, and I feel it's a little bit silly to, well, talk about 2 books like you said, and then maybe a seasonal wrap up might be a good idea.
yeah. So what's your reading schedule now? When are you finding time? When are you getting to sit down or lay down and go through it?
It's normally, well, I mostly do audiobooks now because it used to be 50-50, where I always listen to audiobooks when I'm driving to work and back, which is at minimum 2 hours a day of the 4 days that I have to go to work. Sometimes it's four if traffic is very bad. So I know that not everybody likes audiobooks, but it has made my life a lot more enjoyable. When you're stuck in traffic, it's easy to do. But besides that, physical books, I used to read maybe 2 hours every evening. I can't do that anymore. So it depends. Sometimes it's a much more variable schedule, I suppose, where usually I used to read every day a couple of hours. Now it's if I have time, I might read a lot, one day and then not read for a couple of days. So I want to get back into a schedule without, and that's the difficulty, without it feeling like I have to follow that schedule. If it doesn't work out, it shouldn't. But my brain works very different than
Yeah.
most people, so I need to not fall into that trap.
And in answer to Shadia's question,
Ooh. Well, I'm still reading. It's the fourth book of the Rainwild Chronicles. I'm almost done with it. I'm listening to that one, and I was actually going to finish it this week, but then my headphone for in the car, it's not working, so I haven't
right,
listened to an audiobook this week. But I'm almost done. I think that I have 2 hours left, and then my physical read is The Witch and the Tsar, which is a new release, and I'm not really liking it that much, so I might DNF it.
right. No, I'm going to finish. What's the first Age of Madness book? Is it The Trouble with Peace? A
It's
Little Hatred.
A Little Hatred, yeah.
So I'll finish that tonight or tomorrow, and then I mean, to minds, it's either going to be Death Masks, so the fifth book in the Dresden Files, or The Revenge of the Rose, which is the penultimate book in the Eldrick saga, which I'm hoping to finish before the end of the year. And in between, I may read a couple of the Conan stories. So I've got some of the Peanuts comic strips, which I'm hoping to finish next year, the whole collection. So there's that.
Elric is by Moorcock, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I have the first bind up. So
It is trippy. It is trippy as I mean, and I mean it like in the literal. He must have been on acid while writing some of those things. It's just weird, particularly the last one I read. Because I got them on the Kindle. I haven't got them physically. It's not Sailors on the Seas of Fate. It is The Sleeping Sorceress, right? These are the Golanx editions from about 5-7 years ago. It was weird because he does this whole multiverse thing, right? Which, you know, breaking news: Sanderson didn't invent any multiverses. Moorcock did it, and you've got Elric, this sorcerer with the sentient sword, and then at one point he travels through these parallel universes to a parallel history where Hitler's still alive, and you've got the French and the British Secret Service trying to infiltrate Germany, but Elric is there as some kind of Earl, Duke, rich, wealthy man. So what the actual fuck is this, right? And these metatemporal detectives that travel through different, and it's weird, man. Absolutely weird.
it does sound extremely original, but not what I was expecting.
No. And the problem is because the whole Elric thing is a mess. The whole thing is a mess. I mean, there's no. It's really hard to read it in any. I mean, they were not even written in order. He just wrote different short stories whenever he felt like and jumping around. So the editors do have a job in the hand trying to put it together. So you will have a fairly classic high fantasy story, and then you've got this weird thing next going on, and then he will talk about an attempted assassination of Alexander the Great, and somehow it all merges together. But it's I can't explain it. It's a bit like the Sandman comic. Trying to explain to someone what the Sandman is very difficult. It's something that you gotta read to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those that I thought like, oh, it's going to be very old school fantasy, sword and sorcery. I know what I'm getting into, but apparently I need to brace myself.
Right. So yes, to begin with, and the problem is all the different parallel universes have their own um, realization of the eternal champion, right? So the idea is the forces of law and chaos are fighting, and there are these eternal champions that fight for the balance, and sometimes they support chaos, sometimes they
Mhm.
support order. So you've got Eldrick in one universe, but then you've got Corum in another universe, and Ericos and Ulrich von Beck in a different, and all these different eternal champions sometimes meet and they go on quests together. So it's all like, even reading Eldrick, you don't get the full picture.
Hmm.
But trying to read the whole thing would be a ridiculously big undertaking. So yeah, but it doesn't help that Moorcock was more of an ideas person rather than an execution. I think he said he'd rather have one good idea poorly executed than a lot of bad ideas really well written. So sometimes the stories are a bit childish, sometimes
Mhm.
they're a bit rushed, sometimes, and you're more there for the concept than
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
execution of it. But
It reminds me a little bit of Sanderson as well, where I think the ideas that he has are sometimes cool, but how he executes them and puts in the details, which is of course also understandable if you write multiple books a year, quality is going to suffer probably.
I don't know what's going on there. I was, because Charles was telling me last Sunday that he's now brought in another author to work in the Cosmere thing. So I don't know whether he had planned the whole thing, and now Cosmere is running away from him, and he's trying to rope someone in to help him,
Hmm.
uh, put it all together. I don't know I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, it's. I also don't know a lot, but I do know that he said that he has like an entire idea for the Cosmere, and then he has some of the series like the Skyward series that is not connected to Cosmere because that's more sci-fi. And he has all of those ideas, and he knows how big he wants that universe to be. But realistically, the chance that he will be able to write all of it is, well, he wants to write 4 Arrows of Mistborn, 10 books of Stormlight Archive. It's usually already for a lot of of authors their magnum opus. And then he has a lot of other books. He wants to actually write Warbreaker. I think he wanted to have a trilogy, Elantris as well. So he says that if he wants to execute all of that, he needs to add other writers into it. I think that for Skyward, for example, or maybe it's a different series, it's a YA one, he has some novellas that one of his students has written with his editor skills and stuff like that. But I have heard a couple of people say that they didn't like the writing that much. And that's something where, just my personal preference, I would have liked great quality that is not completed instead of saying, well, I'm just going to hand it out to other people, and I'd rather have a complete set that is not quality all over the board. And that's where, even though George R. R. Martin is probably never going to finish the series, and I know that a lot of people are mad at him that he says, like, even if I die, I don't want anybody else to finish it, but I can respect that. And I like that approach more than what Sanderson is doing, even though something in the middle would probably be best.
I don't know, because obviously I started reading fantasy a long time ago. So I come from the Dungeons and Dragons school where you had a lot of collaborative world creation. So you have the Forgotten Realms, but within that you had 10 different authors all in the same world writing different characters and different story threads. And sometimes they might cross over or they might reference each other. And Dragonlance was the same story. I think in Dragonlance there's about 100 novels, and you've got the core 20, but then everyone else added and expanded and did bits and bobs. And a bit like Malazan, isn't it? Everyone seems to think that Ericsson is the core one, and then Esselmount is interpreted to be optional.
Hmm.
So maybe with Cosmere it's going to be similar. And I don't mind it so much, and I actually appreciate the honesty rather
Yeah,
than him
that's
having
also true.
a ghost writer, I suppose,
Hmm. Yeah,
or
true.
or something like that. The key there is going to be whether the quality of the writing or the
Mhm.
style of the writing fits the
Yeah.
world. But in principle, I don't mind it so much. I
I think I'm a little bit on the fence with w- I have not read the Dungeon and Dragons ones, but as far as I remember, you have a trilogy that's written by one author, and then another author can write another trilogy, but it can be connected, but the one story, the one arc is written by the same author. While with Brandon Sanderson, I think with the novellas of Steelheart, he gave them to another author. And maybe that's for me that's too much of a logical approach to it, because I would think if I'm an author, that's a series that I'm currently writing, I'm going to complete that one. And if I'm done with that series, I might start another one. But I'm not going to go with, oh, let me write the main series, and then the novellas, I don't find them important enough. Let's give them to somebody else. And I'm going to go over to another main series. It feels like people are not passionate enough about that series, because otherwise you want to complete that one before you jump into the other one. So it kind of depends how they go about it. Also, something that I hate, and George R. R. Martin has that for some of his books, like Windhaven. I haven't read it yet. The name, and that's with Brandon Sanderson as well, is like the biggest one that you can see, and then be below it is like the author who has actually written it. And
Yeah,
that's a little bit I don't know, because if you don't know the entire history around it, if you don't watch Booktube, you just go to the bookstore, you see a Brandon Sanderson novel, you pick it up, and you actually don't know that that's not the person who has written it.
yeah. I think Sanderson and Martin have become brands,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, unfortunately or fortunately or whatever, that's what it is. But I think in general, everyone is pretty much in the know. No one is gonna. I can't imagine anyone new to fantasy picking up a Brandon Sanderson branded but not penned book. I don't know. I think
Hmm.
everyone is fairly knowledgeable about the thing, but it'll be interesting. It'll be because it could be possibly the biggest or the most popular collaborative world that we may have ever seen.
Hmm. Yeah. And of course, I'm also a little bit, well, I'm not looking at it very objective just because I haven't liked the last books that he has written. So of course you're going to be a little bit more harsh than probably than when you like it. Like George R. R. Martin, I give him a lot of slack because, well, not a lot of slack, because I really like what he's written. So it's like I always look at him like, but he's trying just because I love his work so much.
Yeah, but we know he's not trying, is it?
No, probably not. I need to
No,
face reality.
he's got fuck you money now, so he's yeah, he's a businessman. He runs the Song of Ice and Fire business.
Yeah.
I saw I
And
saw him. I mentioned this last week. I saw him in an interview that when he was discussing the HBO series, he was arguing down to how much money, how they were going to split the money they made from selling key rings. So
yeah,
that's what he's spending his time on. He's never going to finish A Song
no,
of Ice and
it's
Fire.
I'm I'm afraid to hope at this point, and maybe he's going to finish the next book, but there's supposed to be one after that, and I don't see
Yeah.
that happening. But and maybe this is why I appreciate his approach more. I'm not a very big completionist. Like, of course, if I have the option, I would like to have a story and have a series completed. But now I've read the books that came out in A Song of Ice and Fire. I've loved them. If another one doesn't come out, I'm fine with that, I suppose. It's not like I'm going to be extremely annoyed. So much time has passed at this point. It's fine.
But I've said this before. There's so much anticipation, there's so much desire and craving for the series to be finished that I know you don't rate him that much. But hear me out. A team of John Gwynne and Joe Abercrombie together, supervised by George R. R. Martin, would provide a satisfying ending to the series.
They probably could. Yeah. I I would just be extremely stressed out. And I think that that's what Wheel of Time fans were probably experiencing as well when Jordan unfortunately died before the series was finished, and of course Sanderson finished it. It can go either way. Maybe it's absolutely amazing and then you're happy that they did it, and maybe it's trash. And I don't know at this point if the series will have a very satisfying ending, because a lot of people are feeling very sad and very angry about how the show ended, and I don't
But
know.
that's a positive because the ending cannot be worse than the TV show.
That's also true. Yeah.
So the way I say it, it's a win-win situation.
Mhm.
And then he can go back to running his trains in Santa Fe and watching
Doing
movies
whatever he likes.
in his own cinema that he's bought over there and stuff like that.
I
You know?
must say, I do wonder if the next book comes out, if the what will the general consensus be? Because at this point you have people who for 10 years have entire YouTube channels dedicated to A Song of Ice and Fire theories, and they go so deep into that. Like, I love that series, but don't ask me about like minor details that happened in the first book, because I just don't read books that deeply and that detailed. But at this point I feel like people have put so high expectations in it that he cannot provide.
But I think he's an intelligent man, and he said it before, which is why he wasn't happy with the TV show. And he said that if you hint or you leave enough clues in your books as to what's going to happen in the future, and people pick up on those clues and guess what's going to happen in the future, that's credit to their reading and your writing. You've achieved what you set out to do. However, what he didn't like about the TV show is that there were all these clues in the show, and because people guessed what's going to happen, they changed
Mm.
the ending, and then that's when people got pissed off because you've kind of crapped all over, you've betrayed. Well, then characters start acting out of character
Yeah. Mhm.
because you're still trying to surprise your audience and shock them. And he was quite clear about that, is to have that internal consistency, and then that can be even more satisfying when people see their expectations realized because they've been paying attention and they've been clever readers. So I think he would deliver what people have guessed.
Mhm.
And but
I hope so for the next book, because I'm still hopeful about that one, but we will see.
yeah, that's not gonna come out until 2025 at least.
Mm.
At least.
Are you watching House of the Dragon?
No. I of late I've got a I don't know, TV doesn't seem to fulfill me much anymore. I gave up on Rings of Power after episode 4.
Same.
I gave
Exact
up
same
on
moment as well.
as much as I loved The Boys, I gave up halfway through season 2. Wheel of Time, I watched the first season, but I got no interest anymore.
Same.
I don't know. TV shows, I think the golden age of TV shows is gone. And they're not really holding my attention anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, I barely watch TV. I think, well, now we are watching House of the Dragon, which is one episode per week. That's the amount of TV that we watch. But you are right. When we look at the latest fantasy shows, The Witcher, I have stopped watching as well. And then Sandman, I stopped, even though I could see that it was great, but it was not the type of fantasy that I enjoy. I don't know, it didn't really grab me. So I was like, there's not really anything wrong with it. I can't really point at its flaws, but I'm also not really eager to continue watching.
That's
And it's go ahead.
no, because that's another one. I love the comics. I watched the first season, but I'm not thrilled about the next one.
Hmm.
I
And
don't know what.
for me, it feels like that's for multiple fantasy series that I'm feeling, and it's not because because a lot of people can really nitpick and say, well, that's different from the books. That's not exactly the same. Like the dwarf females in Lord of the Rings of Rings of Power didn't have beards. That's a huge problem. I don't really nitpick about that. I can see that that's a difference. I can let it go. It's an adaptation. It doesn't need to be a one-on-one. But still, being very lenient, I still didn't enjoy most of those shows. But House of the Dragon, I did like so far.
Yeah, Rings of Power is a funny one. I way before we knew anything about it, I made a video saying I'm not interested because I knew they didn't have the rights to any adaptation. So they were not adapting anything. They were just creating something. And I can get past, even though it's a bit jarring, to have all this mix of races and all this kind of stuff that doesn't quite make much sense in world. I can get past all that if the story's good, if the characters are good. It just wasn't. It just weren't.
Hmm.
And particularly your main character, Galadriel, she was fairly unlikable and
Yes.
fairly, um, yeah, she's not someone, or the way it's written or the way it's portrayed, it's just not exciting enough to carry a whole TV show.
Yeah, I agree. There was also I can deal with unlikable characters if they're supposed to be unlikable, but I had a feeling that that was not what they were going for, and just some of her actions felt very unrealistic for an elf who has lived for hundreds of years. She's extremely wise, and then she does the most stupid stuff that just to move the plot forward. And you can almost see like the wheels turning. She needs to do this at this point because this needs to happen next. And that's just something that it started to become very apparent in the fourth episode, which is why after that I just stopped watching.
Yeah, it did. Nothing made it any sense. Like the arrogance of the character, and yet people did what she wanted and
Hmm.
followed along. It didn't make sense. I don't know. It's something I don't want to say much about, but it seems that it's hard for whatever the reason. They don't, whoever they are, don't seem to be able to write a decent female lead character.
Mm.
Marvel has had that issue recently with a lot of their shows and stuff, which is why I would like to see a proper adaptation of Elderlings,
Ooh.
because there you've got fantastic. If you want to see female leads and great female characters, I think Elderlings have got them in abundance.
Yeah.
And if you did a season per trilogy, it'd be great because every season you're introduced to new characters and people, yeah, whatever, and then at the end it all comes together. And I thought it'd be a
Hmm.
great it'd be a great TV to adapt because it ticks kind of the boxes that Hollywood these days is hoping to tick,
Yeah.
but just well written. Like you know the channel The Critical Drinker.
I don't know, but I will have to look that up
So
because that's a nice name.
Critical Drink is this Scottish guy, and he does a lot of. He's a writer, but he does a lot of movie and TV show commentary, and it's very funny. But he knows what he's talking about. Um, and I was saying that because of something he said recently that I've forgotten. I've lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Hop
Uh,
and
uh,
Realm of the
Hope,
Elderlings.
Hope doesn't want an adaptation. Well,
Hmm. Well, I can see why though, because I feel like for the entire Fitz storyline, you have the skill and you have the wit, and it's difficult to put that on screen because a lot of it is internal monologue, and you can probably do that if you have somebody who is extremely passionate about the project. But it seems like lately you have A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones, and that show blew up and it got a lot of money. And of course, everybody was very happy about it, everybody who worked on that. And now it feels like they're trying to find the next big thing. And they're not really passionate about it. It's like, oh, what do
no,
we have here? Oh, Wheel of Time, maybe try that. Oh, The Witcher, let's give that one a try. And as an author, I would also be very hesitant when they come knocking at my door at this time.
no, you are spot on. Like HBO got, I think they got lucky because to be honest, the books weren't that popular when it was the TV show. There was a bit of a feedback effect between the TV show and the books.
Hmm.
Um, and they're now chasing the next Game of Thrones. And
Yeah.
they looked around, oh, Wheel of Time has sold 100 million books. Let's try this. And it was rubbish. And now Lord of the Rings. And yeah, I can see why. But I would love to see a proper adaptation of elderlings.
Yeah, if it's done right, and I think especially, but that might be an expensive one, although fantasy series in general are probably expensive. But the Life Ship Traders one, I think that that would be one that you can more or less easily adapt. It has a lot of action. It has a lot of very interesting characters. That would be a nice one to adapt. But with the live ships, it would also be difficult to make it not look silly.
Yeah, you need this proper special effects there. Hey, John. Um, yeah. Anyway, really sorry. You probably got more batteries than me, but I gotta take the kids to the extracurricular stuff tomorrow, etc., etc. And it's gone past midnight now, so
Yeah,
my
I can sleep in. So
my carriage has turned into a pumpkin, and I'm not gonna sleep in tomorrow. They don't allow me to do that. Jolien, must say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight.
yeah, same. Really had a nice
I've
evening.
been trying to not mention this. I'm still a little bit resentful that you forgot about me this summer, but
I was
I sh-
hoping you didn't mention that.
yeah, I try, but that's why I'm not a very good person, right? Can't keep it in. But I shall extend an invite if you and your husband ever fly your way over here. You have direct flights to the next town up where I live, and be more than happy to show you around and have you around.
Well, if we ever get to Spain, that will definitely happen. And if you ever come back to Belgium, I will really put it in every agenda that I own that I don't forget.
No,
It's
no,
not going to happen.
fool me once, and all that stuff. So
Oh.
it's okay. It's okay. I've just written in my black book of debts, and
Oh.
I'll keep it there.
I will
Right.
try to redeem myself in Spain.
Brilliant. And thank you very much, Shadia. She's always there. Jesus. That's great. And Chris, thank you ever so much for popping in. Thank you, everyone. And we'll meet again. When is it? In next week, isn't it?
Next Sunday. Yeah, exactly.
Next Sunday over at Steve's channel for book one of the Age of Madness.
Over at mine.
Is it? Is it? Oh, is it yours? Oh, so sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I met the end. Okay, I need to fix that. Okay, over at yours. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.
Yeah. Good night. Bye bye.
And finish.